When I started my political evolution, I have listened to various sides of the spectrum. In high school, I would definitely have classified myself as a Southern Baptist and a conservative, but there was something amiss in my belief system. I always sought out evidence to justify my positions. Honestly, there is no evidence to justify a belief in a deity, especially one as capricious as God. When I started college in 2006, I encountered my first professor that really shook my beliefs to the core. Deep down inside, I knew that there was no way I could reasonably believe in a God because science and reason alone contradict a belief in a God. My philosophy professor made me feel secure in the thought that it was okay to have an opinion that went against the grain of local conventions. As you can tell from my accent, I'm from the South, and common knowledge is that the South is the Bible Belt, and Mississippi tends to be the buckle on that Bible Belt. I idolize people like FDR because of his policies being able to pull America out of the Great Depression and for being a strong leader through almost all of World War II. They stayed this way all the way up until 2015 with the onset of Gamergate, and at that time I was wrapping up my college career and getting out in the real world, and the emergence of a new alliance between ideologues like Anita Sarkeesian and Zoe Quinn and the shoehorning of social justice ideology into said community when it's not needed in the first fucking place. I still had reservations about agreeing with the right wing because of my left-leaning views, and I was very intolerant of any right-winger because of my belief in trying to achieve equity for all through government programs and being told by professors that by being white, I inherited the original sin of privilege and racism. What really stuck in my craw and made my stomach turn towards the left were because of the double standards that were out on full display. The left is so quick to drag Christians through the mud while giving Muslims and Islam in general a free pass. Starting in 2005, I started noticing YouTubers like TJ Kirk, Sargon of Akkad, Thunderfoot, and others going against the left, even though they were themselves on the left of the political spectrum. I started to look at other right-wing ideologies like libertarianism, anarchism, and in particular, anarchocapitalism. Probably the most old school of ANCAP YouTubers is Shane Killian. That's who I started to really notice coming into the fold. When watching Killian, I often admired at the production, research, and analysis he would put in his videos. He made plenty of salient points, especially when it came to criticizing the role of government being a detriment to economic activity, like with single-payer health care, with the passing and opposition to the net neutrality, or the Luddite attitudes towards modernization. I even enjoyed watching Killian dismantle idiots like Aquila, obviously, and Steve Shives. But some of his videos that really stuck out like a sore thumb to me were the ones he made against people like Six Hexenhammer 666 and Sargon of Akkad. Granted, I watch these two regularly, and sometimes they are wrong about shit. At first, I tried figuring out why it bothered me. Then I realized at its very foundation, Killian is an ideologue. Everything that passes through Killian goes through an ANCAP filter. I am struck at how Killian poo-poos the idea of a state being just an arbitrary line. He also poo-poos the idea of freedom of association and freedom of disassociation. He most of all uses the cudgel of natural rights when he says that the state is infringing upon the natural rights of immigrants coming into the country. Thus, it got me thinking, it got my almonds activated about the most important value that ANCAPs have to hold on to, and that is the non-aggression principle, or the NAP for short, or the NAP. Shane Killian points out how, by the state enforcing immigration laws against immigrants, we are violating their freedom of movement. The problem that Shane Killian has is that he is unable to play devil's advocate and argue on the side of those who want more restrictive borders, other than to call them statists or to call them racist. It just lacks any intellectual rigor to do so and to insult people because they have a different point of view. Honestly, in writing this script, I thought that I would be only making a response to his arguments against borders, but I'm also going in the direction of making arguments against the ANCAP ideology. And as in the first stanza of my video, it was an explanation of how I came to have the beliefs and opinions that I have. Now, in relation to what he has against borders, he made the argument that by having restriction on immigration, that we're a violation in natural movement of those wanting to immigrate, and makes the case that immigration turns out to be a net benefit to the nation in the long run. The problem is that I run into with how long does it take, and that he states that they pay more taxes than they take out. Really? How come that economic analysis shows about 50% of them being on welfare? So, for example, it said immigrants pay $150 million in taxes. The other half will gobble up the revenue. In states like California, illegals often come to the U.S., get treated at the hospitals for free, given a meal voucher, and a free ride back to the border because it is so porous. There are also immigrants that come to the U.S. that bring in drugs, rape, and murder. The majority are law-abiding and peaceful, but in order to come here, you must prove yourself worthy to do so. Then you bring up the cornball patriotism of the Statue of Liberty inscription. Give us your tired, huddled masses yearning to breathe free. Problem with that is when the inscription was written, because context does matter, we were under a huge industrial boom, and there was a large supply of factory workers needed, and immigrants filled that void. Also, they were also European and held similar values as many Americans, including hard work and self-reliance. Besides, we don't need a bunch of low-skilled migrants, especially since their jobs will be replaced with automation. How moral is it for a bunch of people to come into the country being forced to live on the dole to get by? I mean, since you're against big government and giving welfare, why would we want more people on the welfare rolls? Another economic pitfall will be the addition of new arrivals. That means that there will be more of a demand for new housing, thus making already high housing prices increase even more. Lastly, you think that people paying illegals with peanuts is a good thing because of the fact that the price of goods will drop for the consumer. I guess you're just another one of these hipster douchebags that don't want to have to pay $3 or $4 extra for his kale salad. That may be so, but there is a higher cost to be wrought. The price of having to pay for welfare for Americans that are no longer being able to gain employment due to the fact that an illegal just took their job out from under them. Hell, Cesar Chavez, a Mexican-American, was a union leader that actively sabotaged the property of illegals because even he knew that illegals would undercut the workers he represented in his union and would drive down wages to the point where they would not be able to compete. When you look at the West, people, including myself, can feel that it is a civilization on the decline. Economic prosperity may be as high as it has ever been, but culturally, there is a riot. I mean, you even said yourself, why would you give a fuck about, say, for example, Sargon's, when he's lamenting about the problems of Britain, let alone the problems in the U.S., because their problems aren't necessarily yours. And I hate to say that's full of shit. Because of the fact that since you do live in the U.S., you do have to abide by the laws and mores of said society, and you are encouraged to assimilate and adopt some values, i.e. of self-reliance. So the idea that you live in a vacuum astray from the values that a society is trying to promote is idiotic. With the steady stream of immigrants that come to our nation, they carry with them values that are anti-free market and against the Constitution. A lot of Latin American immigrants come into the country from socialist societies, and a lot of them seem to want to push socialism into our country. Excuse me. Majority of Latin Americans that enter our country disagree with the right to bear arms, and 72% of Hispanics believe that hate speech is a form of violence. The idea of these folks taking control is scary to me. ANCAPs, conservatives, and leftards will oversee the dissolution of America we know, love, and cherish. Maybe it's just an idea, but at one time you could say it was an idea that came to fruition. The immigrants from before adopted our values and assimilated because they were expected to do so. But now you have a left wing that is hostile and anti-American, and conservatives that are too scared to go after them or else risk losing any support from them and the possibility of ending up on an SPLC watch list. Just like with the Covington incident, conservatives like S.E. Cupp took and ran with a narrative to earn brownie points with left-leaning outlets and to prove they are not bigots themselves. Everything that embodies Americanism, capitalism, self-reliance, and individual liberty is attacked and is actively being suppressed with collectivism, globalism, and socialism. Putting your nation first, it seems to now these days be akin to Nazism. To wit, a huge fault that I see with ANCAPs like Shane Killian is that capitalism is not the magic bullet that solves all our ills. Capitalism has given the West the highest standard with unparalleled access to wealth. It is a place that allows even the poorest of poor to advance. Nonetheless, capitalistic societies has hollowed out various institutions, including church, family, and social groups. Western values are in an existential crisis that where individuals are left only to strive solely for themselves, not a God, idea, or even a collective for that matter. In the case of whites, we are left to be increasingly more atomized and our power base shrinking. In Shane's anarcho-capitalist society, we are to survive solely by the NAP. But who would enforce the NAP but a government? Herein lies the rub. Anarchism is the absence of government, hence the name anarcho-capitalism. A weakness, for example, with the NAP is, would it prevent a group of individuals forming an army that you knew was going to be used to rob and extort money from people be a violation of their NAP? So a group of marauders could form their own troop of people that would extort money from their neighbors around them. I mean, would it violate their NAP stopping them to form their group of marauders? What about unchecked corporations wanting to snatch up land without recompense, but in stopping them is a violation of their NAP? Most of all, would not making citizens rush to the aid of their neighbors a violation of their NAP? I mean, after all, you take on the nihilistic attitude of, my neighbor's problem's not necessarily my problems. So it'd be a violation of your NAP if, say, for example, if a civic organization formed obligating you to defend your neighbor's property, even though it's not your property being threatened. This is just one of many questions I would have for ANCAPs, but to sum it all up, like with anarcho-communism, anarcho-capitalism is utopian and impractical. Even libertarians like Hoppe argue for the defense of borders. For example, take a small nation like Monaco. If all of a sudden a bunch of Africans arrive and overwhelm them to the point of demographic replacement, Monaco would cease to exist. In my opinion, forcing a nation to take in immigrants that they do not want, that will subvert their values, replace their native population that made and built the country as great as it is, like the United States, and will erase it from existence, but only in name, is a violation of that nation's non-aggression principle. Borders exist for a reason because it defines the extent of its realm, but to let people come into a country unimpeded defeats the purpose of having nations and having borders. If so many third worlders replace the native white population in the U.S., it will no longer be the U.S., but instead will be a third world shithole. There are innate reasons, culturally and biologically, to why majority white populations are the most desirous to immigrants. In closing, we are at a turning point. People like Shane Killian hold very cynical and materialistic views that offer nothing substantive except acquiring possessions and accruing filthy lucre. ANCAPs, conservatives, and leftards care nothing about America except what they can get out of it, even to its demise. They are the equivalent of Grima Wormtongue and Saruman, who tell us, "Let the orcs come." They mean us no harm. Otherwise, as Jordan Peterson said in relation to describing the ideology of the alt-right.
I'm going to drag you back to the alt-right.
Oh yes, the alt-right, yes.
One of the core, and I think it's one of the most avant-garde political movements we have right now, and at the core of the alt-right is a belief in ethnic nationalism. But not the sort of oppositional nationalism that we all know. It's more of a Frank Salter, Verdugan universal nationalism. Do you think this core belief of the alt-right is flawed? Is it laudable? Is it reprehensible? Or?
It's incomplete. It's incomplete. I mean, it's identification with the Father, and that's necessary. But the purpose of identification with the Father is to become the Son, right? And I mean that in all of its symbolic manifestation. And the problem with nationalism is that it forgets that. It forgets that the purpose of the nation is to give rise to the individual. And what's happened now, because our identities have become fragmented, is that there's a call to reconstitute the Father. And that's at the core of the alt-right thinking. Well, that's the benevolent part of the alt-right. I mean, there's a downside, there's a negative side to everything. I mean, one of the things that's quite disturbing about the alt-right is its continual proclivity to degenerate into anti-Semitism. And I see that in the comments, for example, on my videos continually. So it's oversimplified. And there's also no true recognition, or not sufficient recognition, that the state is also a pathological monster. And the alt-right should understand that, because of course that's what the left continually claims, right? The state is a pathological monster. Well, they're trying to produce, the left is trying to produce, I got that wrong. It's the basis of the alt-right's criticism of the left. The alt-right says the left is always trying to expand the dominion of the state, and the state is a pathological monster. Yet what we should do is become nationalists. It's like, sorry guys, there's a bit of a paradox there. And, so that's basically what I would say about that. It's not surprising, and as long as the radical left keeps pushing the way they keep pushing, then the alt-right is going to continue to grow. Although it's also very difficult to tell at now to what degree, to how large the movement is, or how serious it is, or any of those things at the moment. So
I realize that after all, some ideals are worth fighting for and preserving. We on the right need a new narrative and need to be activists in a way we can counter the narrative and activism of the left.